In this episode, Megan Dougherty and I are back for our exploration of WandaVision, and today we look at episode 3, Now in Color. Hello everyone, Tom Fox and Megan Dougherty back for our current series, and we're exploring WandaVision today. It's WandaVision episode 3, Now in Color. First of all, welcome back, Megan.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
The series, in my estimation, really picked up with 3, and it really dynamited forward with 4, which we'll get to in our next episode. But there was one thing I really wanted to start off our conversation visiting with you about, which was we saw Wanda's powers in episodes 1 and 2, and we see them again in episode 3. They are either not fully formed or she can't control them. And it struck me that now that I sat and watched it straight through, that she doesn't know she has these powers. Some of the events that happen are not intentional. Some are intentional. The power outage, I think when she goes into labor, was certainly not intentional, that we'll talk about. But it seems like a woman who is struggling with her emotions and feelings, and things are happening around her because of that. And I was wondering, I guess the flip side to that is maybe she's always known she is or will be the Scarlet Witch, and she's not yet fully formed those powers. But I really got the sense of confusion, and I want to say all teenage girls go through that. I'll let you speak to that issue. But I saw my sister go through that, and your body's changing, your hormones are changing, boys are changing, everything is changing. And many times you don't know how to control that or how to feel about it. And certainly I shouldn't limit it to girls, boys too, because I went through that. But I was really wondering, another possibility that I thought of is she is in such a deep state of grief that she's getting just bouncing. Her emotions are all over the place. I've never gone through really deep grief, but as in the loss of a spouse or the loss of a child. But obviously I've grieved parents or ends of marriages, that kind of thing. But I didn't see the kind of bouncing around like I see here. And I just maybe wanted to start off by asking you, what were your thoughts on any of those? Or did you see things even in a different direction?
I noticed something pretty similar about this episode. This was the first of the episodes in this series where I think she started to gain some kind of an awareness about her ability to control. Because as you pointed out, there were definitely things that she was causing to happen that she didn't intend to happen. There was making the butterflies in the mobile come to life when she said fluttering. There was creating the stork and trying to disappear the stork. And then the power outage, of course. She didn't intend to do those things, but she also did enforce her will a lot more on what was going on in changing Vision's direction of conversation and getting rid of Geraldine/Monica. So I think she's becoming aware that she is special to this place in some way, or this place is special to her in some way. I don't know if she fully understands how yet, because I think of neighbor Agnes, which maybe we can get to in a little while. But as for the cause of all of it, I think you're onto it with the deep grief. I didn't get so much of it as like a kind of a changing, like a puberty analogy, so much as based on what happened in Endgame, and this is set 3 weeks after Endgame, so she's recently been unblipped. The events of Infinity War, where she had to kill her own lover and then lose anyway, just happened in the flash of an eye. And I'd say, if anything, it is extraordinarily complex and profound PTSD that's causing this. I don't think she set out to do this. She did it, but I don't think she intended to, and I don't think she's fully aware yet of the extent to which she is controlling her environment. And that one thing I've written down in big all caps letters here is like, they have a PTSD expert and counselor on the team who was unblipped at the same time she was. Where is Falcon? Where is her therapy? Why? That really bothered me. That wasn't addressed in any way. Why is she all alone after this happened? They were all together at the funeral of Iron Man. Why wasn't there some support for this team member? And that's a question I would like Marvel to answer. What do you think?
That's really interesting, because I had not considered the PTSD. And actually, even more than the raging hormones of a teenager, I think you're right. I think it is the PTSD. I couldn't conceive of understand how grief could lead to this wide range of emotions. But I think that's it. In a later episode, even in this episode, Vision develops some self-awareness and some questioning and she rewinds that questioning so that it doesn't move forward. So you're absolutely right. She is using some modicum of control, and then the Geraldine example was, if not a lot of control, certainly a lot of rage, and which is something you typically see in a PTSD individual. I think you're really onto something there. Maybe civilians didn't get the same sort of benefits in the United States that the military veterans did.
But even Hawkeye, she and Hawkeye chatted at the end of Endgame about how horrible it was that these people they loved so much were gone. And he, in previous films, had taken her under his wing. I don't get why she was left so profoundly alone after all of this happened. It makes me really angry.
Hawkeye had his own stuff to deal with.
His family came back. I'm delighted about that, but there were resources available that I feel like were denied to her in some way, and
let's stay on that, because I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
She's a woman. She's Sokovian.
She had been a bad guy.
She was a bad guy because she was on Hydra's team. But the other thing is, this was a superpower or enhancement that was done to her as part of an experiment. So maybe you're onto something, that she truly is seen as an outsider, even with a group of outsiders such as the Avenger, and because of her deep love of, they may have isolated themselves unintentionally in a way because they were so profoundly committed to each other. And we certainly got that in the last couple of episodes of the movies on both sides. Both Vision and she were committed. So that's a really interesting observation, and I think you really might be onto something there. She's always been, and I don't want to give too much away, but she always will be, at least up through the metaverse, an outsider in many ways. The support groups, if we can use that, a recovery term, or other things and strategies that you might try to implement or put in place for someone who has had this traumatic series of events occur to her. They don't seem to have given her the opportunity to utilize them.
Yeah, on the one hand, I mean, there could be an in-world explanation for it. There could be a canon reason, or we know other movies have been made. They may have just been screenwriting her into a big bad role. But I think that's why my first comment after, and I'm sure we'll talk multiverse in a future episode, but I think ultimately they did Wanda dirty. And I think it's demonstrated why in WandaVision.
Okay, so now let's move to something, if not lighter, perhaps a little more positive, which is twins. And do we have to assume Vision cannot father children? Although perhaps we shouldn't assume that. And if he can't father children, did Wanda create these children as a part of her overall oeuvre or gestalt, and then pretty quick gestation to birth, period? Which did provide some interesting comic relief.
Yeah, I like the fruit metaphors. I thought that was fun. Yeah, I don't have any trouble believing she willed two fetuses into existence. I think based on what we are coming to learn about her powers, that doesn't seem like a huge stretch to me. Now, do they have anyone else's DNA? That's a really interesting question. Could be no. They could just be, there's a more technical word than clone, but basically little clones of of Wanda, or manifestations of her will or essence. I think that's cool. But yeah, I don't think, because even the Vision that we're seeing is a construct, not the original Vision. So if there was some kind of technological methodology to progenate, I don't think that would be at play here.
We'll always remember Data was a fully functioning unit. So as he told Dr. Crusher.
That's true. That's true.
So what about, let's get into the twins, because there's a couple of things I really loved. The first one was the discussion around naming. And you probably haven't had this privilege yet, but every baby, the parents of every baby go through this. And the guy wants one thing and the girl wants the other. And in my experience, the woman always wins, or should win. But that led to this dialogue between them, one around the names, but two, one of the great lines I've seen so far where Vision quotes Shakespeare. And
I got that.
yeah, using that as a reason to have a son named Billy, where Wanda wants Tommy. And if we didn't know at that moment that we're going to be twins, shame on us. So what did you think of that whole comedic scene and where that led?
Oh, I thought it was great. I had something a little similar. I had played out in my personal life recently. And the nice thing about twins is each parent can choose one. And that's just a built-in compromise right there. It's lovely. But I loved that Shakespearean quote. It's the 7 Ages of Man speech from As You Like It, I think. And what a great choice, too, for this particular episode. All this, it's a stage. We're players. And I wonder if that meant does Vision know a little... Because Vision is starting to become more aware of what's going on, too. And I wonder... That was very much in character. But maybe not entirely in character. Maybe it was starting to also hint at... something is wrong here. Something's not right about what we're experiencing, like a 9-month pregnancy condensed into less than 48 hours, which is a little weird. I think even he, as a non-native human, would pick up on that one.
What about the doctor who is leaving, trying to leave to go on vacation, but it turns out he can't leave? Anything about that strike you?
The thing about small towns, you just can't escape them. And I thought there was also something that was going on there, too, because Wanda was making a really big fuss about hiding her magical pregnancy. And she was saying, on with Vision, hey, don't let anyone know that this is weird. Don't make any note that this is weird. Even like when they're having the conversation with the doctor, instead of, how did this happen so quickly, just, how did this happen? But then when he went to fetch the doctor for the actual birth, he made no pretense whatsoever of hiding his super speed when he got the doctor on his back and hoofed it home. So I just thought that was interesting how Vision is much less worried about hiding any element of themselves from people in the community. And of course, the doctor was making kind of it known that, yes, he's trapped. He can't go to Bermuda.
We had another great cookie in the form of an ad, and that was for soap, and it was for Hydra soap. And I think this is the third direct reference we've had to Hydra through 3 episodes. And so, 1, that was extraordinarily cool. 2, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, Wanda and her brother Pietro were basically created as enhanced humans or superheroes by Hydra by exposing them to the Vision Stone. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on, is it trying to convey that Hydra's behind this? Is it trying to convey that she is a creation or a construct of Hydra? Or is it just something that is way cool for geeks like us?
I think it's way cool for geeks like us. And I think if it's trying to convey anything, I think it's that everything's a construct of Wanda's experiences. I think it comes from Wanda, not externally. Again, with the possible exception of Agnes. Yeah, I think because everything in the world is from her mind in one way or another. And all of these little things, I think the ads that her brain is coming up with, they're just coming from other points in her history, things that she remembers, part of her personal past.
So we have to get to Geraldine. And it was a brilliant way to introduce the woman we come to know was Monica.
But who deep down we know is Lieutenant Trouble.
Yes, Lieutenant Trouble. But first of all, I have to say the first scene when she opens the door and Geraldine's there with her afro, multicolored, crocheted vest, that is so 70s.
Fantastic outfit.
So 70s. I was like, yeah. So that was cool. But even rewatching this, what I couldn't understand was why she let slip about Pietro. And we're going to have to give a little cookie, or rather, spoiler alert, we're going to see Pietro in another form, and we'll find out why Lieutenant Trouble, Monica / Geraldine, knows Pietro is dead. But I still don't understand why she let that slip out. Or is it because she doesn't understand her role yet? She's just come in to the Wanda universe in the the township. And is it perhaps she just doesn't understand her role yet?
I said a little bit differently, because I think if you remember right before that scene with Geraldine and Wanda, Agnes and Herb are outside, and they have a little conversation with Vision where they're talking about Geraldine. And they say, she doesn't really belong here. She's not from here. She doesn't have a family. She doesn't have a home. And then Herb tries to say, it's because we're all trapped. But Agnes stops him really aggressively with really don't do this language. But I think then when you get in it, it sets in Vision's mind that something is different about Geraldine and maybe some of the other people in town, or maybe himself. But then I think it's during that conversation where Geraldine / Monica brings up Pietro, I think that's when the switch happens. I think that's when Wanda's awareness really turns on. And she's just had the experience of birth, which I hear is a big deal. And then she has these memories brought back of Ultron, of Pietro, of Sokovia. Her accent comes back a little when she says his name. She sings to the twins in Sokovian, and then she brute forces Monica through 4 walls and out through the force field. I think that was the moment of flip. I think Monica had at least enough awareness to try and poke the bear. That was what she was there to do, to learn, to find out what was going on. Even if she was in character, I think because she didn't have the backstory, she wasn't supposed to be there. I think she was able to niggle Wanda a little bit like that, and I think that caused the light bulb to turn on for Wanda.
Because she wasn't supposed to be there, Wanda couldn't control her. Oh, very interesting. Okay, now let's get to the part where Wanda... Oh, you got more?
I was just going to say, we have no evidence yet that I can think of that she can control Agnes.
I think you're right.
Okay, I'll just leave that one there.
And it becomes more... I still say this, even in rewatching it a couple of times, the scene where she blasts Geraldine/Monica out of there was one of the coolest. And you could just, one time I even watched it, I turned the sound off just so I could watch the fury in her face build and build till she drew up the power to throw her through the force fields. And I just loved that. It was just, to me, so dramatic. How did you feel about that scene?
I think for me, it was the moment of we're not playing anymore. Or if we are playing, we're playing with the big boys. Now, this is serious. There's serious power at work. Because I think up until now, as you said, we haven't known who was the source of all of this power. But now we pretty much know that it's Wanda, intentional or not. And this is the demonstration. She is one of the more powerful beings we've encountered in the MCU. I thought it was great. And just the contrast of that with her still quietness after she was gone and Vision came back in and she said, everything's fine. That was, for me, it was the flip moment. It was the she's got control moment.
Very cool.
Fantastic.
I have one last thing I'm going to ask you for your last thoughts, but my last one was the music Daydream Believer. I thought that was not only inspired, but nearly perfect. They're sitting there with the twins, and they play as close to a ballad as the Monkees ever did. So I grew up with the Monkees, so they're still part of that DNA. And it's not a rocker. It really is closer to a ballad, and I just thought that was perfect. What about you?
My last thing was, I think it was towards the beginning of the episode when we got the unblip shot, and that's where Monica was introduced in the hospital. And it was just a wonderful way to convey the trauma and the terror and the chaos of half the world reappearing with no notice where they had been left. And the animation of it was beautiful, of her face being reconstituted. But then just the shouting and the screaming and the alarms blaring, I thought it was a really powerful scene for how short it was. Yeah, I thought that was...
Isn't that the only unblip we have?
I think, and I haven't seen it yet, but I think there's one in one of the Spider-Mans.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But I rewatched that several times because I found it visually so stunning to basically...
Oh, and I think this was from our
You're right.
next one. So spoilers, everybody. But that's...
It is from episode 4, but we'll hit it there.
My bad.
I really enjoyed episode 3. I thought it really started us on a path that we're really going to enjoy going forward. Any final thoughts?
No, I think that's it. And now everybody has a great preview of what we'll be talking about next time when we discuss episode 4, We Interrupt This Program.
All right. As Megan noted, next episode we'll look at We Interrupt This Program. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope that you will leave a comment or review for us in the comments section. Megan and I obviously are having a great amount of fun doing this series, and we hope you will join us for the full series on WandaVision from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Compliance Podcast Network.